Hey, what's up, everyone? Joe Carrell here, and I'm excited to be with you guys today on behalf of Kit Plugins. If you know Kit Plugins, you know that they have a very close and special relationship with Blackbird Studios. And what's so cool about that is the Blackbird Studios is probably one of the very finest top 1, 2 studios on the entire planet. I happen to work right next door or even in that studio quite a bit, and it's everything it's cracked up to be. The acoustic spaces are amazing. The consoles are amazing. The mic locker are amazing. Actually, the grammar would be is amazing. The outboard, just everything you can think, even the coffee. I kid you not, even the coffee is amazing. So that said, they have a very special thing going where they are being allowed to model consoles and outboard equipment and now acoustic spaces within that studio facility, that world-class facility. So if we look at the screen, we see the new the Kit Plugins Studio A Blackbird Chamber A. It's actually the official title. And this is a special reverb because it is not just a reverb, it's an actual capture of an acoustic space in Studio A in Nashville at Blackbird facility. So it's kind of like a little piece of recording history. So there have been a lot of amazing records come out of that studio. So we have a lot of things to talk about today. So let's just get busy. So up here on the left-hand side, we have height. And you see this, I can drag this down and adjust how many square feet of acoustic space is inside of this chamber. And you're like, wait a minute, does that mean that the chamber changes sizes? Absolutely, it does. One of the most cool things in the world, because I've stood in that chamber while they adjust it, is the ceiling lowers and raises. So you adjust the tone of the room and the decay time of the room to whatever you want it to be. It's really, truly marvelous. And so that said, we can drag this down to take the ceiling down closer to the floor, or we can actually just drag in here. And actually, if you want to, you can even drag that microphone right there. See that? That's cool. So a little graphical representation of that microphone in the room. That said, you can see the microphone right here. We can choose 3 different options. Here we have the AKG C24, which is going to be the most, let's call that the most balanced. It's going to have pleasing top end, mids. It's just a well, I mean, it's an AKG C24. It's an absolute classic. Sometimes in our reverbs, we want more dark, right? We don't want a lot of high end, that kind of a thing. So we can switch to the ribbon, the R88 here, and we get a more dark, thick, rich. It's not got, it still has high end, of course. It's just not as dominant as it is in the C24 or the microphone we're going to talk about next, the 414s. And that is probably what I would say is the brightest overall, and it's not going to have quite as much low mids and body as the C24, but still going to retain the top end. So you have 3 different tones that you can choose from here. So the C24 and the R88 are stereo microphones, meaning that it's just think of it as Bloomline recording. With the 414, it's a spaced pair. So the width and the imaging is going to be a little different in comparison, which is another cool thing. Plus, right here, right now we see that these microphones are hanging from the ceiling. By one click of the switch, we can put them on the floor. Maybe you're thinking, why do I want to change the position of the microphones from the ceiling to the floor? And I'm very glad you asked that, because if we have the microphones on the floor, as we adjust the ceiling height, of course we get the expected decay time change, but the tone basically stays the same. All right, but if we want to go up to the ceiling, as we lower or raise the ceiling and change the decay time, we get a noticeable shift in the tone as well. So it's just a way to kind of really manipulate at the, without any, before we even get to the EQ, we're really manipulating the sound of the acoustic space itself and taking advantage of everything it has to offer. And we're not even done yet. We can go direct, which is going to be the most linear. So that's the sound of the console, the signal hitting that chamber in a very linear, flat way. We can also go hi-fi, meaning that there's a hi-fi speaker in the room. And think of that as just a little bit of a happy face. So we have a little bit more top end and a little more bottom end than we did with the direct. Or we can choose the PA speaker. And this is the one that's actually in the studio most every day. A lot of the engineers that work there, including the owner, John McBride, prefer this. And it's a little bit more mid-range forward. So, and a lot of times That's where we want our reverb to live, right? We don't want them real sparkly on the top end. We don't want it real thick and boomy on the bottom end. We really want our reverb to cut through, like from 400 cycles to 1K or 2K. And this is this is going to do that naturally before we even get to any controls on the bottom. One other thing in this middle section is our pre-delay, which is of course self-explanatory, but it's built right here. And then lastly, right now we're going to be at 100% mix for our demonstrations today because they are being used in a send and return fashion. But if you place this directly on a source, this is going to be how you control the dry wet, okay? Now let's get down here to the bottom. This input is driving signal into the chamber. And obviously on the other side, we have the same thing on the output. If we need a little more level to tape, so to speak, to hit our returns, we can get it right here, or of course we can trim it. Now, this is where it gets interesting. It's uniquely Blackbird already, right? We have that chamber with its moving ceilings and those speakers and those microphones. So it's very unique already. But this takes it another step further, actually multiple steps further. And it's like being in that room and using it with that console. So they have a beautiful Neve console in there, an 80 series Neve, and it's been highly modified. It's very unique to that room. So part of using that chamber in that room is the sound of the fact that it's being fed and returned through that desk. So they actually modeled that as well. So we have the saturation right here, which I was playing with this briefly before we went on camera, and it is legit. If you want saturation, you can get it from just a little bit to noticeable distortion, which, sometimes is a really cool thing on Reverb. And any of these, I will let you know that, see, there's a power button. So if you want saturation or EQ, high pass filtering, low pass filtering, you have to activate it. All right, so that's our saturation. Now below that is something else that's very usable and useful in reverbs, and that is a high pass and low pass filter. Now this, you will notice, I have two options right here. So this is filtering and shaping the tone to the chamber. So this is in pre, and you have to turn those on, of course, to use them, right? So do this kind of thing. By shifting to post, you also have to engage those if you want them, and then we can shape the return. So, it's extremely full featured. And that's just the top and the bottom extremes. In the middle, we have the actual 31105 console EQs from that beautiful Neve, and we have all four bands right here. You notice these frequency points, like on a Neve, 5.6, 3.9, 390 on those four bands. I'm sure a lot of you that know these kind of desks or use plugins that emulate them, these frequency points and know what they do and what that means. So that's very cool to have it right here. And of course, you just turn it on right here. Lastly, we have a compressor. So we can compress our reverb return, which is very cool, very useful at times, but it takes it one step further. So see this little icon that kind of is shaped like a duck? Well, there's a reason that it's shaped like a duck. It's a ducker. So we can actually, when the vocals, for example, are a lot of words strung together and they're really busy, so we don't want reverb to cloud up that moment. We just turn on the ducker here, and we can turn it to the point where it kind of reduces the reverb during the words, and then when they stop singing and take a breath, it kind of lets the reverb, come back up, and so it's mostly audible when they're not singing, which is another valuable tool to have at our disposal. All right, that said, that's enough talking for me. I want to hear some music, and I'm sure you do too. So let's hit factory default here and get it back to the way it was supposed to be. And I've got this song that's very haunting, and she was looking for it to kind of just not be like crazy amounts of reverb, but very obviously very reverberant with lots of effects, and that was creating this mysterious soundscape that she wanted. So I thought, man, this would be a great song to give this a try on. So here's the song, the lead vocal and the acoustic guitar kind of driving the show right here, completely dry.
I know you see me like I see you, a certain glimmer we can always recognize.
She sounds amazing, even dry, right? So let's go up here to this reverb send and go over here to this reverb return. Let's go to vocals 1. And let's just kind of start playing.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize.
Okay, that's the C24. So that's going to be the most linear, flat, we want to call it, full body, top, mids, everywhere else. And this is our maximum ceiling height. So that means that's as long, that's our full decay time. So let's start playing around. First of all, the first thing I hear is that I want some pre-delay on there. So let's just turn that up.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize.
Okay, I'm using too much reverb, of course, because I really want to hear as I switch between these things, I want you guys to be able to hear the tonal differences. One other thing I know I want to do real quick in the presetting, I want to take a little low end out of what I'm sending to the chamber.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize. Through the veil there's an ancient whisper.
Okay, perfect. So we got rid of a little of that boom. That said, the R88, I'll change to that, and that has the most bottom end, but of course I've pre-filtered some of that out, so you may not hear as full effect unless I turn it off.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize.
That is pretty.
I know you see me like I see you.
Okay, let's stick with the C24. Now let's keep that up here around 300 cycles or so, just to get rid of some of that boominess at the very bottom extreme. And now let's start playing with our speaker selections.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize. Through the veil there's an ancient whisper.
I see why John and so many of the others there like that PA speaker. That mid-range, in solo, of course, it can be considered a little less attractive, but that's what makes it work in the mix. That's where some of our real estate lives for reverb. So I absolutely see why they like that sound.
I know you see me like I see you.
It doesn't have quite as much top end spitty sound as the more full range speakers.
I know you see me like I see you.
You hear that difference?
I know you see me like I see you.
Very cool. And remember, as far as that top end or what I was calling spit goes, we can also contour it a little bit by switching to post and start dialing this down.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize. Through the
I kind of like that. So that top octave is gone. Really, we could even go lower.
I know you see me like I see you.
But I'm gonna leave it there for now, so we can hear it in the mix and kind of hear the soundscape of everything up to 10 dB coming through. Okay, one other thing I want to do here is I want to play with a little bit of low mid.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize. Through the veil.
Just cut out just a little bit, right? All right, I want to show you what this saturation sounds like. I'm not sure it's right for her vocal on this song, but nonetheless, you need to know what the circuit sounds like.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize.
Obviously, we can go into full-on grit, but did you hear how forward it starts sounding? You don't hear it as distortion. You just hear kind of a more audible bite to it. Saturation is such a fun tool.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always
Check it out before and after.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always
Okay, to my ears now, without that saturation on, it almost sounds it doesn't sound sterile. It just sounds so much better and with more character with the saturation for me at least at this moment. Ask me tomorrow, we'll see. Now let's start playing with decay time by lowering the ceiling.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize. Through the veil there's an ancient whisper.
Okay, so now I want to check it with the floor engaged. With the microphone on the floor, the microphone's closer to the speakers that are generating the sound, so we may get a little tonality difference, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it'll sound cool.
I know you see me like I see you.
You know what? I'm going to raise it back up here because I think we'll really be able to hear the difference the most with the longer decay time.
I know you see me like I see you. I know you see me like I see you.
See, we're putting the microphone closer to the speaker.
I know you see me like I see you. I know you see me like I see you.
I can hear that. I can hear that distance. That's cool. So that said, I like the distance. I'm going to go with the ceiling for this, and let's just move it closer to the floor.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize.
Okay, so now let's take her out of solo, put her in the track, and we can dial in the amount of send to get the right amount of reverb on her vocal.
I know you see me like I see you. A certain glimmer we can always recognize. Through the veil there's an ancient whisper.
All right, very cool, very cool. Let's try the acoustic guitar, because the acoustic guitar on this song was really, I mean, it's what it was written around. Let's bring both of these sends up and just kind of put them around unity for now, which is going to be too much. It's going to be too much, but that's okay. Okay, that's a perfect example of this is the C24 full range. This is direct, and we haven't done any kind of filtering. And you probably heard during that chord change, the bottom end of the room just is really being excited. So let's get rid of a little of that in pre. We do not want to send that boominess to the room. Let's go up to about 400 cycles. That cleaned that right up. That's very effective. Okay, so saturation was so cool on the last one. I want to hear that on this guitar right away before I even start dialing in anything else. Let's just leave it there. That seems like a sweet spot. I get a touch of it. Actually, let's use a little bit more. Now, I'm not sure if that's a sweet spot or not, but that's two sources in a row where right around 12 o'clock straight up sounded great to me. So maybe that's a little bit of a sweet spot. So let's change this to the 414 so we get some top end and just see what this is going to do for us. We'll switch to hi-fi as well. So this should, in theory, be the brightest option. Of course, if we did really want some zingy high end, we can just go up here to 10K and turn this guy up. Very, very easy to do, of course. Let's just play with the decay time here. Now, I kind of like that. I find that attractive. So that's the R88 ceiling and the PA speaker. And I'm not going to use any, on this song, I don't think I'm going to use any pre-delay, because the whole idea was that they're in some kind of an enchanted, haunted environment. So let's just let the acoustic guitar live there. You know, no dry signal before it returns to us. So now that we experimented with more top end, let's hear it with less top end, because that's probably what I would actually do in the mix. And of course, we can choose whether we're filtering that out before it hits the chamber or upon the return. I think I'm going to filter it out on the return. So we will excite the chamber to its fullest and then kind of dial back some of that top octave where, you know, some of the highest frequencies that are bouncing around are less attractive on an acoustic guitar because it's already such a bright instrument, okay? I kind of like that. All right, so let's put her vocal in with it and see what we got.
Recognize through the veil there's an ancient whisper. Listen closely, sister.
Okay, now we can just cut it down just a little bit because it's a little too much, but rather than go over to the sends, I can just turn on the output.
Recognize through the veil there's an ancient whisper. Listen closely, sister.
Now that's a lot of reverb, but remember the artist wanted a lot of reverb, as well as we're really trying to hear the sound of this chamber in action. Another spot that, that could be really fun is I'm going to go up to a chorus where she's a little more belty and there's a little more going on musically. And I'll kind of play that with her vocal really dry at the moment. Yeah.
The earth, the fire burns, the air, it turns the water into waves.
So it's still very warm and rich, but I think this would be a fun spot to play with the vocal compression and ducker. So let's just do it, by gosh.
The earth, the fire burns, the air, it turns the water into waves. We move in unison.
Okay, so that's where we're starting from. So let's dive into the compressor. So if we want to have more reverb all the time, that kind of a thing, as her dynamics or whoever's dynamics we're working on are going up and down, we can compress it a little bit and get a more consistent level, just as we would on a bass guitar or anything else.
The earth, the fire burns, the air, it turns the water into waves. We move in unison to the music.
So the reverb is staying very consistent. Okay, so now the opposite of that is to click this little duck button down here and get a ducker. So now when she's singing and all her words are stringing together, as we mentioned earlier, it's going to seem like we have less reverb, and then the reverb will pop up when she's not singing.
The earth, the fire burns, the air, it turns the water into waves.
And I'm going to go to the extreme just so you can kind of hear what it's doing.
The earth, the fire burns, the air, it turns the water into waves. We move in you.
So this is one of those things that it's all about finding the sweet spot. So we can just dial it in perfectly.
The earth, the fire burns, the air, it turns the water into waves. We move in unison to the music within, to set our soul aflame out in the wilderness.
That would probably be a good spot right around there. Let me take her out a solo here.
The earth, the fire burns, the air, it turns the water into waves. We move in unison to the...
Now let's switch to the compression option and just hear the difference here, because we're going to be getting more reverb all the time. So as her words are stringing together, it's going to be a little more washed out.
The earth, the fire burns, the air, it turns the water into waves. We move in unison to the music.
So those differences could be anything from subtle to extreme, but subtle is very often what we're being paid to do. Well, this was fun for me because I've worked in that studio. My tracking room is actually right next door to it, and I've mixed records that came out of there. So it's almost like I drove 35 minutes south and kind of worked for the afternoon, so which was kind of fun. So that said, if you also had a good time and are interested in this plugin, you can go to kitplugins.com and get yourself a 14-day demo and try it on your own mixes and see kind of where it fits and where it works best for you. And that said, right now, there's actually a half-off sale. So for the introductory period, buy it now. Save yourself a little hard-earned cash, a little hard-earned bread, and get it right now while it's on sale. I hope you had a great time. Thanks for watching. Happy mixing.